like to call the meetings to order. Presentation by the Department of Transportation and Consulting Engineers, SRF, Inc., in regard to two proposed alternatives to Interstate 94 / Exit 2 Carmichael Road interchange concepts. Want to ask the council and what's your preference on this? How do you want to ask questions during the presentation, or do you want to wait until the end? What's your preference, folks? Any preference?
I think we should ask them during the presentation so that we have some clarity at the end.
Okay.
And I might forget.
You can write them down, Rich. But, so, that's what we'll do then, and we'll have the, Denny, do you want to lead off with anything here?
I want to thank the Common Council and Plan Commission for meeting tonight. About two and a half years ago, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation visited with the Common Council in regards to how can additional capacity be added to the Exit 2 Carmichael interchange. There was funding for studies that was provided. It's been about a 2-year process. We were hoping to be done a little bit sooner in 2014. However, there are public information meetings held in July, and there's a public comment period with the DOT through the end of July. In August, the local planning group looked at the issue again, and to try to at least start getting to a point of making decisions on one of the two alternatives, or the city recommending a preferred alternative, I requested a special meeting of the Plan Commission and Common Council so that the DOT and their consultants, SRF, would be able to make a presentation, answer any questions that the Common Council and Plan Commission may have. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Kooning from the Wisconsin DOT. He's the gentleman at the lectern. Also with us tonight is Josh Miles and Todd Pullum from the consulting group. So I think Mayor Burchell identified the general process of the presentation, being able to ask questions during the presentation, but at this time I'll turn the floor over to Jim.
Welcome, Jim.
How do I get this up on the screen there, Josh?
There it is.
Oh, we got it. Okay.
Just, if I can just, there are some paper copies of the presentation at the end of the table, if people would like to get a copy of it. We've got some additional copies too. Anybody else?
Okay, well, thanks, Denny. Denny did a pretty good job of going through the study background. The limits, we'll go through that on the next slide. Purpose and need, we'll kind of hit that. The oversight, as Denny said, it's been a cooperative effort to try to come up through a down select process of several interchange configurations at 2 locations. We're going to present the concepts that are currently being considered, and we'll go through some next steps and our schedule. So the study limits are from, technically, our environmental document goes from the river, St. Croix River, through the US 12 interchange. However, the focus of this preliminary engineering study has been on the Carmichael Road interchange, and then the 3512, those 2 interchanges and how they interact with each other. As Denny said, this goes back a ways, and back actually in about 2010, we started identified that there could potentially be ramp issues at US 12, and we started to consider a study. And also at that time, Hudson came to us with their concerns at Carmichael, so we brought these 2 together to try to study it as a system because of their proximity to each other. Purpose and need, really it's the growth that's going to take place at both of these locations. You guys are all aware of the request for redevelopment of property along Carmichael Road. We all know that currently the interchange itself is pretty busy, and the traffic analysis, TIAs that have been done for the businesses that want to go in there are showing that they're having a hard time fitting them in with what the traffic is. At 12, it's a little bit different. We don't quite have the same amount of volume there today. However, there are some other geometric issues that we had to work through. And that location seemed to come to preferred alternative kind of on its own. Whereas at Carmichael, we have a couple that we feel are acceptable traffic operations out to year 2035. So the study oversight, we put together a project management team, and that was WISDOT and our technical staff, who in this case is SRF. We also put together a local advisory committee, so that as we went through this process of finding alternatives and narrowing down a range of alternatives, we could get some local feedback on that, and that included WISDOT, St. Croix County, City of Hudson, and Town of Hudson. And we also have had one public involvement meeting to get comments from the general public on the concepts that we're moving forward with. So at this point, I'm going to have Josh take over. Like I said, they're our technical experts, and he's going to get into some very technical stuff.
Thanks, Jim. It is technical, so, slow me down if I'm going a little too fast. We conducted a freeway or a traffic operations analysis. We looked at existing conditions and 2 horizon year conditions, intermediate year of 2025 and a horizon year of 2035. We used the St. Croix County travel demand forecast model to develop future year forecasts. And this model takes into account development assumptions that are consistent with local plans and roadway network assumptions that are consistent with local and regional plans. This slide shows existing traffic volumes and traffic forecasts for year 2025 and 2035. The numbers in yellow, the top numbers, those are listed, and then as you go down, the middle one is 2025 and the bottom one is 2035. And as you can see, the volumes over the next 20 years are going to increase pretty significantly along the I-90 corridor. This next slide shows existing and forecasted volumes for the Carmichael Road interchange. And as you can see, there's some pretty significant growth between now and year 2035. And if I can draw your attention to the location just south of the interchange and just north of Crestview, today that volume is about 36,000 vehicles per day, and it's forecasted to get out to 50,000 vehicles per day, which is a pretty significant number. So then we take those forecast volumes and then we run our operations analysis. And one of the key measures of effectiveness that we looked at, it's called level of service. Basically, it's a grade, letter A through F, that you assign to an intersection or roadway segment. And basically that grade is very similar to what you received in school, A through F range. And level of service A through C are considered acceptable by WISDOT. And for intersections, the level of service is based on average vehicle delay. So if you add up all the delay the vehicles are experiencing and you divide it by the total number of vehicle, and then that value, based on that value, it gets placed into a level of service range. This graphic shows the 4 key intersections that we were looking at along Carmichael. We have Cooley Road on the north, the 2 ramp intersections at I-94, and then Crestview at the south. Today, Crestview operates at a D, and that's a typical weekday commuter peak. There are some times, during the holiday season, sometimes on weekends, that you will probably see that get worse, and even during like a peak 15-minute interval. The important thing about this slide is, as you look forward, you look down to the middle and to the bottom, the year 2025 and 2035, you can see that over time, basically all of the intersections are going to have some sort of issue. And what we were seeing is the congestion levels would build to a level that they would actually spill back into adjacent intersections and also down the ramp and would impact I-94 by year 2035.
If I can interject here, Josh, and just remind everybody, as Josh was describing the level of service, that's over an hour. So you could actually experience more delay in a more concentrated 10, 15-minute period. But this is on average over the entire hour. So in some cases, in some moments in time, it could be even worse than that.
Thanks, Todd. So we identified the problem. There's going to be some pretty significant congestion. So we developed some concepts to solve that problem. We developed 7 system concepts for the interchange area, and we also developed some concepts that were non-interchange related, such as an additional overpass to the west, maybe a new overpass to the east. And all of these concepts were based on traffic operations, how well do they work, what's the benefit, property impacts, local road impacts, pedestrian accommodations, and bridge needs. At Carmichael Road, we also did an evaluation at Highway 12, but we're going to focus on Carmichael Road tonight. There were 2 rounds of evaluation, and what we found is the non-interchange improvements, such as the overpasses, were found to provide insufficient relief to the operational issues at Carmichael Road, so those were not carried forward. And basically what that means is if you put an overpass in on the east and west side, you're still going to have operational issues at Carmichael Road. And then 5 of the 7 interchange concepts that we looked at were dismissed due to 3 of them did not provide acceptable level of service at the interchange ramps, and 2 of them had longer traffic queues and they had more bridge requirements. So those 5 were eliminated from further consideration. So that gets us down to the 2 concepts that were presented at the public information meeting on July 1st, and those are what we're going to focus on the rest of the presentation. The concept D has 2 loops with modified frontage roads, and concept G is a diverging diamond interchange. And each one of these concepts, we have 4 slides, and the first one talks about geometric changes. What are the physical geometric changes? The next one talks about access changes. How does this impact access today? The third one is operational benefits, and the 4th one is costs and impacts. And when I go through these, I'm actually going to go up to the boards and point out a few details. So the first one we're going to start with is Carmichael Road, concept D, and this is the folded option. It has the 2 loops. And the purpose of the 2 loops is to eliminate left turns.
Can you pull the mic out so that, because you're on TV and we'd like the audience at home to be, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wish I had 3 hands right now. So we'll start with concept D, the folded option. And this concept, the geometric changes are adding 2 loops. And basically what they do is they take left turns out of the interchange, which makes it more efficient. And once you put those loops in, you can see that the ramps that are there today, they need to be moved outward. There's no space for them, so you have to push those outward. And then you notice the frontage roads, those also got to be pushed out further. And so that is the physical geometric changes for concept D. Now, in terms of access, it's a little different story. And so now with the frontage road which currently ties up with Cooley, that actually needs to be routed to the north and would be provided access to Carmichael at a new location further to the north. This location is approximate. This is very preliminary, and that could be determined at some point in the future. And also the alignment of this frontage road would be determined at a point in the future. The purpose of this concept is to show that it does need to be relocated. And on the south side, once you put the loop in and we push the ramp down to the south, the road stage line actually has to be rerouted down to the south to provide this location for a ramp to eastbound 94. And so what that does, it does change access to the hospital. So if you're from the north traveling south and you wanted to get to the hospital, instead of taking a left at stage line, you would have to go 1 block farther and make a left and then come back up to the north. Operational benefits. Concept D, all of the intersections, all 4 of the major intersections that we talked about that under year 2035 no build conditions would operate at poor level of service. This concept, all 4 intersections will operate at level of service C. And so that is the best option that we have in terms of level of service. And we wanted to also take into account future growth beyond year 2035. We understand that is just a horizon year. Concept D also has an additional 15 to 20% reserve capacity beyond year 2035. And out of the 7 concepts that we evaluated, that one has the most reserve capacity. Costs and impacts. This concept D, the construction costs are approximately $25 million to $30 million. And right-of-way, 25 to 30 acres of right-of-way would be required as part of that concept.
What requires the bridge to be designed?
That's a really good point. So with the addition of the loops, it's just the lane configuration of how you need to develop and add the loop ramps. And so you need to widen the bridge as well. Yep, because of the loops.
Is that why you made the statement that you tried to avoid any changes to the bridges? You said something earlier to
One
that
of the thresholds is what are the impacts to the bridge? You know, some of them would actually require a complete tear down and a rebuilding of the bridge. So it was one of the criteria that we used to evaluate the interchanges.
Thank you.
But doing all of this only still gives us a level C?
Correct. Level of service C, you know, based on WSDOT standards and general practice, is actually very, very good for future year horizons. And I think today, actually at Crestview, it operates at a D. So if you could imagine by year 2035, Crestview would work better than what it does today. So with all the additional growth, that design would make it work better than it does today.
I just need a reminder, is this concept D the one that the road would cut through the existing golf course area?
No.
No, nope.
Concept G cuts through
Yeah.
the golf course.
Concept G, yeah, we'll discuss that in a little bit here.
So in Woodbury, similar to the on-ramp, they have a spin-off that goes to Woodbury Lakes, and this would be like, you could spin off on the stage line in the hospital, at least to get there.
You mean from the ramp to go to the
Yeah.
to stage line? I believe that is a one-way roadway. I'm not 100% certain because that can actually just peel off and tie in easily. Since Crestline's a two directional roadway, that connection would be a little more difficult to make.
Get a monkey around with something, perhaps.
Perhaps. And we do understand the importance of the hospital and access to the hospital, especially for emergency vehicles. And I know there was some discussion about, well, maybe we could have a little connection from where the existing stage line is that could just, connect to the hospital. And you could control that with a potential gate. So only emergency vehicles, as they approach, they could preempt the gate and it could open up so they could sneak through. The technology exists to do that. However, the ramp would be maintained and owned by Federal Highway Administration, so we would have to get buy-in from them to do that. And from previous experience, it's kind of unlikely to get that connection put in.
Can you explain the exact impact on some of the businesses up there for Target, for example? Looking at that graphic, exactly, what the impact would be on their entrance,
Sure.
exits and entrance.
Sure. That intersection at Cooley today, basically the ramp coming off westbound 94 would be relocated up to Cooley, and then the frontage road would be pushed further north on the east side. This intersection would remain a full access intersection, so anyone coming from the south that wanted to make a left to go to Target and the other commercial development there, they could still do that. And people from the north could also make that movement, and coming eastbound away from the commercial development, you could also make a left and a right. So it would be a full access intersection.
So what's the impact that they're stating that is negative for them based on this?
No, they endorse that concept.
They endorsed
Not
that
G.
one. They endorsed that one,
They
Mary.
like D, not G.
They don't like
Okay.
G.
Yeah, G has some impacts to the Cooley Road.
Concept D then is the one, when we've talked in past meetings, where the flow of Carmichael is better north-south for if we have a situation where the school is built south, if a high school is built south, that's going to allow for better flow than concept G, if I recall, correct?
Correct. Concept D provides better flow northbound and southbound. Concept G, the diverging diamond, which I'll get into a little more detail in a little bit, this is a really good option when you have a lot of traffic turning. So if you have a lot of traffic coming and going to and coming from I-94, which there is in this area, but there's also a good amount of through traffic as well. All right, with that being said, we'll jump to the diverging diamond interchange. And a diverging diamond interchange, it's a fairly new concept to the region. There's been several of them constructed in the United States.
Josh, did you go through the cost impacts?
Yes. Yeah. There is not a diverging diamond interchange constructed in the state of Wisconsin. There are 3 of them that have been built in the Twin Cities area over in Minnesota, and there's another one under construction and another one that's being designed. The unique feature of a diverging diamond is as you approach the interchange from either direction, the traffic crosses, and then you are basically on the other side of the road through the interchange, and then you cross back. And this design works really well where you have a lot of turning traffic. And what it allows, if you could imagine how Carmichael works today, if you're down south and you want to go north and make a left, you have to wait for the southbound through traffic. Under a diverging diamond, when you get to that point, you can make this left the same time the southbound through traffic is going. And also, when you come off the freeway, say you're going eastbound and you exit and you want to go north, you can make a left without having to wait for the southbound through traffic because that's on the other side of the road. And so what it does a better job of managing the queues, and you also have your traffic signals here are very simple. They're two-way roadways. So one direction goes, then the other direction goes. You don't have all the left turn lanes, and it simplifies how much time is being used for yellow and red phases at the signal. And I should probably go to the PowerPoint here and make sure I'm hitting everything. So the geometric changes, I talked about the crossover. This is going back to the target development. Given the design of this and how the roads cross over, Cooley Road is too close to the interchange, and therefore it needs to be closed. And then a new backage road would be provided for the commercial properties in the northwest.
By who?
I think that discussion will probably come.
That alternative most likely to be totally city.
Okay.
The concept G is the one that goes into the golf course, right? Which would leave from what I understand, no alternative, but it'd be very little chance for residential to be put in there, then it'd be a commercial area.
No.
So
That was the opinion of one developer.
okay, well,
Under concept G, how many north-south lanes would there be versus concept D? On Carmichael.
I believe there are 3 in each direction
There's
on the bridge.
Three north-south lanes,
Yeah.
3 on each side of the...
Excuse me, it's been a little while since I looked at it. Yeah, there's basically 3 through lanes going on the bridge.
And there would be 3 here,
Correct. Now,
even though it doesn't require
yeah, see, that's
expanding the bridge.
the nice thing about this option. You don't need turn lanes with this option because you're taking all the lefts and making them more of a yield condition, and they don't have to wait at a signal to turn across traffic. And so you can eliminate the turn lanes on the bridge that are currently there and use them for through lanes. And so this option actually doesn't require any bridge widening.
I have a question based on some of your statements then. Would you say that concept D is more addressed at addressing local traffic and concept G is more optimum for Interstate 94 traffic easy on and off? Is that, you know, you're kind of saying that. In other words, the G option is much better for people going on and off the interstate. The D option appears to handle the local traffic better. I mean, am I hearing you right, or am I reading something into this?
Todd looks like he wants to answer this one.
Concept D handles all the traffic better, whether you're talking about local or freeway. Josh mentioned that that has more available capacity. That is from both standpoints. Concept G, and Josh is going to get into this. The intersection to the south of the interchange, there's still going to be some level of service issues out in the future. So from a pure operation standpoint of all traffic movement, Concept D is better.
Thank you.
The frontage road in concept G, the northwest frontage road, is that, or northeast frontage road, is that still exist, or is that gone?
The northeast frontage road would also need to be relocated.
So both would keep the frontage road?
Yes, yeah. We provide the frontage roads under both
Okay,
options. It's just the location which they would access Carmichael
okay.
would vary. So that's a summary of the geometric changes, and we briefly discussed the access considerations, especially in the northwest quadrant for the cooling, how that would be closed. To the south, there's basically no change at Crestview. That would remain as is. So the access towards the hospital would still be provided there. So the next slide, the operational considerations. Todd briefly touched base on this. Under concept D, all of the key intersections will operate at level service C under year 2035. Concept G, 3 of them do, but down at Crestview, that will operate at level service D under this concept. So basically, it's the same operations as today, while the folded one would provide an improvement compared to today.
How many acres are being taken off of with G?
Well, that's perfect, because that's the next slide. And so the diverging diamond concept is slightly less expensive. It's about 5 million less. It's in the range of 20 to 25 million in construction costs, but it does require additional right-of-way in about 5 acres. So it's 30 to 35 acres in right-of-way.
And potentially higher cost to the city.
I think our next slides, we'll get into that a little bit, right, Jim? Okay. But so, and more construction costs with D, less right-of-way needs, less construction costs, but more right-of-way needs here. So there's some trade-offs. One has more construction costs, less right-of-way, and vice versa.
I have to interject on that, though, by your own statements, by the longevity and the traffic that'll handle, one that will last 10 years, potentially longer, is actually cheaper, because then you don't have to do anything for a number of years. I mean, is it safe to say that? If traffic volumes on one design will handle the traffic 10 years longer than the other one, that's cheaper.
Yeah, when we gave those numbers, we specifically used construction costs and right-of-way needs. We didn't do a full benefit cost that looks out into the future and gains your benefits over horizon. So, but your point is valid.
So to be clear, the northwest quadrant on option G, that is not going to be paid for by, or split with DOT, is that correct? Or you would actually split the cost of that?
Yeah, well, generally, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but I can cover that right now. We would see the cost here on either option at about 50%, a 50-50 split, because each party is gaining something from these interchanges. We're not going to try to split hairs and say this frontage road is Hudson's right now at this level of the game. Now, when we've gotten into those kind of agreements with communities in the past, if for some reason an opportunity comes up where Hudson can get infrastructure built as part of a redevelopment of a property, you can get credit for that. It's through the cost share agreement. We'll work that out just so there's some kind of credits given for that. So it's not like, well, just because that's gone, now we have a new number and we do 50/50 off of that.
Jim, where did the 50/50 come? Can you is it based on the city or, because, let's say the Roberts interchange, how was that one assessed, do you know?
That was 100% WISDOT on that one. And what we do is generally take a look, there's a cost share policy, and you take a look at what's driving the true need for the project. And in this case, a lot more of that has to do with the traffic that wants to grow along the city street. At 65, you have a state trunk highway connecting to the interstate system. So it's a little harder to say you're going to pass that lead on to Roberts or do the same kind of assessment on them.
How about exit 12, that interchange? Because I don't think that was a 50/50. I don't think they
Exit
paid for anything
12.
out there.
At 63? No.
No, at Highway 12, State Highway 12 and 94.
Exit 4.
Exit 4.
Exit 4. I don't believe that town paid anything out there.
I don't believe so either. Well, once again, you've got a state trunk highway coming in and connecting, so that makes a big difference on that. So, like I said, this is our kind of thoughts on it right now. We're still pretty early in that game, but we want to be up front. Don't lead anybody down a path and say, oh, by the way, in the 11th hour, now you guys got to commit some money for this.
Well, I'd like to give some food for thought on that then. We are a city of 13,000 people, essentially. Yet we service maybe 30,000. The city of Hudson provides infrastructure for all the surrounding towns. If they have to go to the grocery store, they come to the city of Hudson. If they have to go to another big box, any local store, anything that's in the city, because none of the surrounding towns really have those types of stores. Now, if we have a school that comes to south of the highway, that's the entire school district, which is basically the surrounding towns. So I would ask the state to consider looking at exactly who's paying that 50% of the share, because I don't feel it's only the 13,000 people in the city of Hudson using Carmichael Road and that interchange. It's well beyond that. So if it's going to be a shared cost, I would ask you to look, if it's not going to be 100% picked up by the DOT, I would ask you to look at the county as a whole, or whatever you have to look at, because to put that cost just on the city of Hudson residents, I think is absolutely ridiculous. So, that's all I have to say.
Maybe we
for
can
that.
make it a state highway. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying, but that happens to this city all the time.
Yep.
We have to pay for everyone else to use the infrastructure. It's
Okay.
not, so,
I think we know how you feel, Mary.
just wanted to give them the
Yep.
food for
Just,
thought.
I just wanted to give a little bit of a WISDOT perspective on the two options on the table. I don't know if we can get that up on the screen here or not. Okay. And a lot of these points have already been asked and brought up, and that both of these interchange types are acceptable to WISDOT. However, they're not equal interchange types. Todd brought it up. I think we had some questions. This gentleman made a good point. The alternative D accommodates a lot more traffic. We used 2035 as our horizon year. Our forecast did not include the golf course. What we did is we took Hudson's current land use plan and made forecast assumptions off of that plan. That plan still has the golf course as recreational property. It doesn't include a school changing locations. So there's some things you just cannot predict. If we stopped and did reassessments every time, something like that, we'd be another 2 years before we'd be at this point. So we just decided we were going to try to make a decision, knowing that what our limitations are. So D accommodates more traffic. That's been already brought up. We actually met with Minnesota DOT staff at the Diverging Diamond over in Egan. That interchange is working very well for them at that location, but it's not an exact fit to Carmichael. The engineers there said they only have between 8 and 16% through traffic on that road. There is more here. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it's significantly more through traffic, and it could grow if there's a reason to get across. We eliminated additional bridge crossings early on in this study because they just didn't provide enough relief. The diverging diamond doesn't provide as good an opportunity to use, say, Carmichael as a corridor to get north and south through Hudson. One of the points that the engineers over there, the traffic engineers brought up over there, is that the traffic signals on the diverging diamond are a challenge to coordinate with the other signals on the corridor. Because they're such an efficient signal, it's hard to match them up. And in a signalized corridor, you like to get platoons of cars moving through all at once. And it's a challenge, he said, and they're still trying to optimize that system. So there's that consideration also. We don't want to necessarily say this is what DOT is insisting on, but it seems pretty clearly from a technical standpoint, alternative D is the better choice. And I guess that's what I'd like to wrap up our presentation with. If you have more questions, we certainly take them. Yes, sir.
I've just got one in understanding the diverging diamond. Bear with me, but if you're traveling south on Carmichael, you're approaching 94, and you get to that first interchange, you're going to leave, you're currently going south, you're on the right-hand side, you're on the west side of Carmichael. Now you're going to cross over to be on the east side of Carmichael while you cross over the bridge to the
Yes.
next intersection, and then you're going to come back over to the west side again.
That's correct.
And the other side's going to be doing the same.
That's correct, yep.
How long does it take the general public to learn that? What, I mean,
I can answer. I think it's pretty fast, because if you go over to Terminal 2,
Yep.
where the light rail is, that's one of these diamond interchanges.
That's one,
That
yep.
works really well, frankly.
does it? Okay.
Oddly
Yeah.
enough, but it's kind of weird.
Really quick if you hit someone the first time.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to take very long to
Okay.
figure things out. We drove through it. SRF actually did a video when we were first considering this to see how it works. And the signing is very well done. It just intuitively leads you along that way. They didn't have any crash statistics for us to say, was there more crashes? We did see some evidence that there was some crashes, but they didn't say that's a big issue. It seems like we kind of stood in this corner up in here and watched, and there would be cars that would pull up there and stop and yield to the traffic coming southbound to westbound when they didn't have to. And I think that's maybe what's causing the problem, is somebody stopped when the guy behind them wasn't expecting them. They didn't need to stop, they weren't expecting them to stop, and they hit them bumper to bumper type thing. So they didn't have any crash issues on it, but they didn't have any data to say it was bad either. And we had local officials there who are more in tune with the, how it's working than necessarily MnDOT is.
So in your professional opinion, if there are crashes with these changes, which would cause more delays? Which would be, a crash always causes major delays, obviously, on a road, but it seems to me that the diamond would cause more delay and more backup and more issues to clear, or for people, than the two loops.
Well, that really depends on where it happens.
Okay.
If it's a mainline crash, there's multiple lanes to get around it, so either one is going to function fine. Obviously, on D, if you get a crash on those single lane loops, those are heavy flows, and so those loops are to provide the heavy flows. It's going to cause congestion there. Same thing here. If you get those crashes on, say, your left turn kind of slip lanes, yeah, it's gonna back up in there because people got to navigate through the crash, and they're generally only one lane. Now they're enough for a vehicle to get around.
What's the possibility on D of cutting through that park and ride and shrinking that intersection closer to the bridge so that frontage road can move over, because we have development considerations on the northeast side?
So you're saying bring this in here?
Yeah.
The reason that this geometry actually is required to be here is the speed that this loop needs to maintain. And that this is as slow as we can get. I believe it's 30 mile an hour design speed. So that's as tight a loop as we can get. And that's pretty much as close as we can get to the interchange with this concept.
I noticed on that the trails and sidewalks on G end at Crestview. On G, they continue on through. I assume that's just a
Yeah, that's something
they'll be there. But
Right.
the other thing is, I think, my concern on those is which one gives the pedestrians and bicycles the most separation from traffic? Well, I think that's, and looking at G, it looks like they're moving with it, they're crossing right with it, they're right alongside the traffic as
Yeah.
opposed to being on opposite, being outside.
Yeah, they're handled in very different ways. D is more traditional and they're on the outside. G, they're actually in the middle of the bridge. And that might sound like, well, that's kind of intimidating, but you've got the barrier there.
If it's protected.
Yeah. What we tried to do in any of the alternatives was we attempted to give, to try to give pedestrians the best opportunities to cross. So there are some spaces, you know, if you have the pedestrians on the outside on G, now you've got to cross those lanes where traffic's kind of peeling off. So it seemed like this is where the industry is going. This concept is so new, a lot of these things haven't really codified into standard format. It does seem like in the middle is going that way. Over there at the airport, they have light rail going down the middle, so obviously you can't have pedestrians. I navigated it as a pedestrian, and it was a challenge. They had all of their pedestrians on this side, and we were over here. To get over here was a bit of a challenge. I mean, you got traffic that comes at a really obscure angle to you, and you can't see these signals, so you can't like look at the signal and say, oh, it's red for them now, I can go. Obviously, we wouldn't do that, but either one has their challenges. Now, on this one here, we have pedestrians crossing this ramp here, and there's a lot of traffic here. This ramp here, you try to slow people down, but there's the opportunity there they could come through there maybe 20 miles an hour. So that, you know, this one we tried to find the best spot for it. So we took that into account to make sure that, and that is one of the deciding factors on our matrix is how well or how easily could we accommodate safe pedestrian movement through this corridor.
And I noticed on D that you show it on both sides of the bridge, which is not what we have today. So would that would be included as part of the widening of that?
Correct.
That bridge?
Trans 75, the rules have changed since that bridge was built, and now we would be required to provide pedestrian accommodations on both sides.
I have 3 questions for you.
Can I answer this? He's been waiting here.
No, 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 and I just, I've been listening to what you're saying, and I realize all the timetables for construction are arbitrary at this point, so, I mean, whenever it started and all that, but the point I want to make here is that based on your traffic studies and all that, that if G were chosen, would it be safe to say that within 10 years, we'd be back with traffic problems and having to address something after that massive amount of investment? Would it be safe to say that? Because you are indirectly saying that to us, that if it can't handle the traffic, or it's at a D level, we'd have to do something.
I don't think that's a safe assumption.
Okay.
That we feel they're both acceptable. The only reason that G would not be acceptable is that the operations down at that southern frontage road are as they operate today. So that's using 2035 as a horizon year. Now, as Josh said, there isn't as much reserve capacity in G as there is D.
But that's based on your build date of 10 years from now, correct?
Right, wait. Do things build out as aggressively as we assume? We don't know.
Right.
You know, so there's a lot of moving parts there to make that kind of a statement. Yes, sir.
First question is, right now we've got 4 traffic signals between the frontage roads on the north and south. How many traffic signals would be on D, and where would they be located?
There would be 4 traffic signals here.
Can you
on
show
D.
us where they would be?
Sure. You want to go, Josh? Go ahead.
Yeah, both options would still have 4 signals. Thank you. We have one up here, one right here. This one would still be a signal. It would be a very efficient signal. It would almost be operated, there would be a northbound one and a southbound one, but there would still be a signal there, and then also at Crestview. And for option G, the DDI, you would have one at the north frontage road at each interchange terminal and then also down at Crestview.
A second question, what's the speed limit going to be for Carmichael under these concepts?
We assume to be the same as today.
Yeah, the same.
The third question is, which is the safest option for motorists on Carmichael?
I don't see a big difference safety-wise. I don't.
All right. Thank you.
Denny, have you gotten any other feedback from any of the landowners or the hospital or any businesses besides Target on these options?
Well, I sent out a, information notice
Right.
that we're having a meeting tonight. The only response I received was from Target.
We did receive a response from the northeast quadrant traffic engineers from the PIM. Obviously, they supported the diverging diamond for their concept. There was another question. Yes, sir.
This is a question down the road, down Cooley to the west, in front of Target and Family Fresh there. That's getting to be a really busy road, and the frontage road is right next to the freeway. And at some point in time, so when I look at option G, that pushes the traffic in a new road, I see some value to that. But what I guess I'm concerned about, if we didn't do that and we went with option D, is there any opportunity to widen our frontage road, to get some turn lanes on Cooley, like at 17th Street and some of those other areas? Our frontage road is right next to the freeway. I don't know if you know the answer
I guess
to
we
that
didn't
or
really
not.
look at that with this study. We didn't to see like as far as what's available for right-of-way and that sort of thing. I don't think we really looked at that, did we, Josh? No.
One of our problems in our city is, we don't have a lot of north-south roads, and we just don't have a lot of different ways of getting around town. There's a couple basic ways, and as the city gets busier, those few roads get a lot of pressure on them. That'd be one thing that I think we should look at is, how does that affect Cooley Road down, the next 10 to 20 years also.
Okay. Any other questions?
If there were some more creative ways for crossing, for pads and bikes to non-motorized to cross, would we be more likely to be able to get grants to help pay for those? What's the experience?
Yeah, I think there would be more opportunities to get certain, what we call our TAP program funds. Especially if there was a plan in place that could show how it fits into the plan for Hudson, and we had a standalone crossing for that, then we wouldn't have to put them on the bridge. I certainly think there would be merit in that.
Looking at some of these crossing on D, crossing by Target there, that doesn't look like much fun to me. 4 lanes of traffic is.
So Jim, I can't be in a meeting with you and not ask you about exit 1A or 1B he doesn't even want to talk to me anymore. Is that, I'll keep asking, you can keep telling me it's not going to happen, but is there any chance, we would divert a ton of traffic off the exit 2. I think that would take off on 11th Street and both go south and north in town. As Kevin was talking about, there's 2 ways across the freeway for our whole city. And one is 11th and one's Carmichael. And that's it. That's our only north-south exits for a town of, again, when you figure our service area, 30 to 35,000 people. And that's part of the problem. And, can we help that by getting some of that traffic off of exit 1 and exit 2? I don't know.
Well, yeah, there's a couple questions in that statement. And we mentioned that we looked at additional crossings as part of this study. And we found that it didn't make a significant difference at Carmichael, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't take significant traffic. We identified several locations, and we found one that would carry upwards of 12 to 13,000 cars a day if it was put in. I should say in 2035, we forecasted that. So we looked at multiple locations to the west of Carmichael, and we looked at a couple to the east. And if anybody wants to see those locations where we looked at, we can certainly provide that where they were. I mean, we've got all those maps we can show you. And there really should be more crossings of I-94. However, this is focused on the interchange, and it would take some political will to put some of them in, especially where they're going to do the most good. It would change traffic patterns, and sometimes people don't like that. It can be a challenge, I'll be honest. So we didn't want to get bogged down in discussing whether or not a crossing should be put in or not, when our operational analysis showed it didn't make that big a difference for the interchange. Now, the question about exit 1, when we were here a couple years ago, well, what we said was that the only way we'd be able to get that discussion to move forward with FHWA would be if we could not find alternatives that worked here. So, once again, WSDOT doesn't have ultimate discretion on the access. We'll have to, either one of these, we'd have to do what they call an interchange justification report. And that's like going into FHWA asking for a driveway permit. It's a lengthy report you have to fill out, and why you do it, why it's needed, how does it benefit the system. And I think it would be very, very difficult for us to make a case to open up that old slip ramp. To the point that WSDOT doesn't feel it's worth our effort to go there because of what we've been able to accomplish with these two alternatives.
Thank you.
As you know, I've been in these meetings with you, and I saw the different overpass options. You mentioned one would work the best, and I know we're not talking about it, but do you recall which one that was?
Yeah, it was one of the connected 17 across.
Industrial?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we also looked at overpass crossings in this area, and we didn't show a big use of that, but that's primarily because there isn't a lot of residential that would tap into it. But that golf course goes in there, and sounds like they want to do primarily residential. Those people would potentially use that type of crossing a lot. And then if that went in there, wouldn't that be a better spot for your bikes and peds to cross on a city street that doesn't have the volume that Carmichael has? So there's some symbiotic relationships here that you could maybe take advantage of.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, sir. So down the road, 2035, when one of these alternatives may become a more challenging intersection again, at the time that you start looking at bridge alternatives and things like that?
Well, from a DOT perspective, we don't have a pressing ramp issue that's going to drive us to make this a priority project. There is an issue with how Carmichael operates. And so that's where we have to work out how do we fund it and how do you come up with the money. So that, I can't say for sure. Right now, I should say we probably WSDOT wouldn't have the money allocated before 2022. That's where we're looking at projects right now. So what we're doing here, our goal is that we'll enter into a preservation stage so that whatever we decide to go with doesn't become more expensive from a real estate perspective in the future. So you don't put something that has to be relocated, bought out, take out businesses, that sort of thing. So Our goal is to preserve it until we can come up with how it gets, how the costs get shared, and how everybody can come up with their money. I hope that answers your question.
I'm just, yeah, I guess my question was, what's the step, you know, beyond 2035? You know, what's the next step when we have the next issue at this intersection?
Well, I don't have any answers for the next steps. I'd just like to take one step at a time.
Well,
Because
the reason I ask is because if, let's just say, if a alternative would be another bridge over the freeway to get traffic going north and south off of Carmichael, and 17th was the bridge that looked like provided the most value, let's say, then I'm just thinking out loud, now you've got, on option G here, you've got a road that would hook up to 17th Street, maybe in an area better that would get you across the freeway better. Because that Cooley Road right now, you know, you're not, I don't know how you get on a bridge because it's right on the freeway.
I think Todd wants to comment on that.
You have to have ramps, don't you?
One thing to keep in mind here is that option or concept D doesn't include this frontage road, but it also doesn't preclude it. This road could still happen over here, but it's not required as part of the interchange project. So if the city wanted to advance that idea or thought, or the developer or whoever comes in there, that can happen. It's just not required as part of the interchange. So so what you're describing could happen under both of these concepts.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions, comments? So we have an option to say what we have a preference for tonight, or if we want to think about it a little bit, we can come back to another planning commission and we don't have to do it together, but the planning commission could make a recommendation to the city council. Council has seen it now. Or we can vote tonight. What's your preference?
I've got mine picked.
I've been in like 20 meetings, so I'm good.
I've got mine.
I'm good.
I'm okay too.
I've got mine picked.
All right, then, well, let's, planning commission, do you guys have any preference at this point? Do you guys want to make a recommendation, or?
I'll make a recommendation that we proceed with concept D.
Okay. Is
I'll
there a
second that.
Okay. Any other discussion on planning? It's Mary and I and the five folks at the end.
No, I'm very happy with concept D, so I'm with you on that one, so.
Not a roundabout, Mary?
No. About,
That's Kevin, that's Mr. Roundabout.
So do you want just planning commission to vote on that? And
Sure, and then we'll make, then that'll be the recommendation, or not a recommendation to, unless you have, Mary?
Just a quick question. So if this recommendation is made, what are the next steps then? So what does this recommendation mean if the city council approves it tonight?
I guess we'd,
Jim, did you hear the question? The question was, if there's a recommendation for a preferred alternative tonight, planning commission, common council, what are the next steps? How does DOT handle that? What's the next step?
The next steps, Todd was just reminding me that we have not done full environmental evaluation on either. Now, we did what they call literature search. So we went through any recorded hazmat sites, looked for archaeological sites, historic structures. There's no red flags that have popped up on either of these two, but we still would need to get an environmental document cleared. Hudson can certainly recommend to WISDOT its preference at this time. Just keep in mind that until that environmental document is complete, you know, things could change slightly, or we may have to abandon an alternative completely.
does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Jim, what would be the estimated timeline on it?
Well, we don't have the project, that effort started yet, but it would probably take us about 24 months once we start to get through that process.
To get through the environmental study, environmental impact study?
Yeah.
Any other questions on planning? Matt? Frank, anything? Mary Clark?
You're saying 24 months on an intersection, environmental, on an intersection that already exists?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot of that's the public involvement. And we've had one public involvement, and, you know, we've been out to local, but if you rush that even though there's nothing wrong and somebody wants to shut your project down, they go back to the legalistic stuff. You gotta cover, you gotta cross
I hear
your
you.
T's, dot your I's, make sure everything's in a complete sentence. Because they can go back and the lawyers can dissect it and say, you didn't follow the process. So I don't wanna promise that we can get something done in 12 months, but it generally takes us about 24.
Okay.
Any other questions from planning? All those in favor of proposal D?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Council, you've heard the
Move to approve concept D.
Second.
discussion. Comments, questions?
I think it's a good alternative. I think it has the least impact, targets in favor of it. I don't know, just seems like makes more sense and handles traffic long-term better as well.
Okay.
I agree, but I would like to make sure that we really get creative about how we move people who aren't in cars across there. Because every time we take somebody across there who's not driving a car, that reduces the problem, reduces the traffic. And that's a direction that we really want to head.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So at this point, we'll make a recommendation. We'll have Denny probably put that together and send that off to you. And hopefully we'll stay in contact. It's a long process.
Yeah, we're not done yet.
Oh, yes. Any other things? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.